casework and cabinet work, right, Mike? It is a great way to save money and, enjoy yourself. If clearly he likes woodworking, do some woodworking, right?
My only other idea was tear the house down and just build like 3 more garages.
Welcome to the Fine Home Building Podcast, our weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. This is Senior Editor Patrick McComb. Today I'm joined by Mike Guertin, Fine Home Building Editorial Advisor.
Howdy, Patrick.
It's good to have you, Mike.
Yeah,
Editorial
thanks for
Director. Yeah, sure. Editorial Director for Fine Home Building, Andrew Zellner.
Good to see you again, Patrick.
And our producer, Jeff Rose.
Hi there.
Oh my gosh, this is so exciting. Thanks for being here, guys.
I'm excited. And Mike can barely contain his excitement, so.
So, Mike, we should tell folks, where are you at right now?
I'm in Rhode Island.
Okay.
But I do a fair amount of being here and there and everywhere. So, but now
And
I'm in home
have you been
base.
traveling a lot lately?
Not a ton. Just out to the house that I bought in Arizona. So I had gone out there in the spring, and I went out there this summer to do work. It'll be a project house.
We're going to talk more about that as the show goes on, and we're actually going to have our after show about some of your experience investing in real estate and the pitfalls and rewards of that. What have you been doing, Andrew? Do you want to talk about the Midwest Building Science Symposium?
Yeah, I basically have just been recovering from the Midwest Building Science Symposium. So both Patrick and I were there last week, so middle of September. And we got to see presentations from a whole bunch of super cool people whose names you may recognize, including Steve Basic and Jake Bruton, Ben Bogey. I really enjoyed Allison Bale's presentation. It made me very, very interested in air quality. Glenn Mathewson gave a fantastic presentation on the code. Emily Mottram presented on Pretty Good House, which I think was very interesting to see, and then followed up by Mariana Pickering talking about Passive House from EMU. And it was nice to be in a room with people. That still feels a little bit like a novelty.
Yeah.
And everyone was so nice and engaged, and there were so many good discussions going on, not only about the stuff you're learning, but about other projects. It was also at a brewery, so there was plenty of beer drinking. I think I'm fully recovered from that. Barbecue was great. Travis and Joe, the hosts, were fantastic. And I got to, my flight out on Friday was a little bit later, so I went to the Nelson Atkins Museum of Art. Checked out their Art Deco exhibit too, which was really cool. And the museum was really cool too.
Kansas City, I would add, is a lovely city, and I would say I didn't have a boring conversation with any of the people I talked to at the entire show, so it was fantastic. Keep in mind, there's 2 more, Chattanooga, Tennessee, Austin, Texas. I'll put links to those. The one in Chattanooga is in October, and I believe Austin is in November, right, Andrew?
Yep. And Patrick and I will be at both of them.
You heard it here first, folks. Jeff, you got any projects going on?
Not really. Just kind of working in the yard mostly, getting ready.
Did you
for
get
the
your
winter.
oil delivery yet for the winter?
No, not yet.
Holding off for prices to maybe come down a little bit more.
Yeah, I've been watching prices, and they have been ratcheting down a little bit, but
It's kind of like playing the commodities market. Am I right? You got to
on a very small scale.
Yeah. Well, I think I've shared with the podcast crew my exercise in a new heating plant and potentially cooling plant for my house. And the more I dive into it, the more overwhelming it becomes. Last night I was talking to Carol about replacing windows and doing what amounts to a deep energy retrofit, because it doesn't make sense to size a plant heating system for a house that's going to have upgrades. And I don't need to do any of this work. The house is fine. It's functioning just fine. So I might just table it It's overwhelming. Am I right in saying that?
You're correct. we're all challenged with that, and my house is much newer than yours. It's only about 20 years old, and 2 years ago, I ended up doing just what you were thinking of. I ended up putting a heat pump system in, a split system that can do both heating and cooling, and just trying to figure out how to fit it into an older, existing house and get everything to work right without, just, and then knowing whether or not I go to the trouble of stripping the siding off and putting new insulation on the outside to increase the performance a little bit. When do you do it?
I know. And then so like this, as often happens with Carol and my remodeling discussions, is oh, well, we've always talked about putting a porch over the front door so you don't have to stand in the rain to let yourself in the house. Oh, well, should we make the porch the whole width of the front of the house? And it just goes on, and I just like see dollar signs just flying in front of my eyeballs. And, I don't know about folks, but I worry about the economy and it's like, is this a good time to be spending money? I don't know. Is it ever?
The thing that happens a lot with me, a relatively new homeowner who wants to do all the stuff, is, like how much are you allowed to factor in your own time versus like, at some point you're going to have, you're going to hire somebody to work on your house, and like the cost savings I think about in my head for doing things myself are probably overestimated, and Jill, understands that like we still don't have any crown molding in our kitchen 3 years after I started, remodeling it. Yeah. Would you do you think about doing a lot of the work yourself, Patrick?
I think of only doing the work myself, Andrew, to be honest. Excepting the HVAC system, like if I were going to put in expensive ducted mini splits, I wouldn't attempt that. But I've also seen, split systems you can buy from Mr. Cool now, Central Equipment, with those pre-charged line sets and quick connect fittings. You don't need to evacuate the refrigeration lines and put the refrigerant charge in. It's a matter of connecting brass fittings. I've watched the videos. It looks pretty easy. I don't know. Do you guys think that makes sense? Is that something that a DIYer can do? I'm asking you and the podcast audience.
I think it's doable. And even if you had to evacuate the line set in a conventional system that doesn't have the quick disconnects, you can buy a vacuum pump and do it yourself, and it may end up saving you the time. With all of the videos that I've watched on how to do it, and watching friends of mine who are professionals, they say, really, there's nothing to this, really. If you got your gauges and you just evacuate, and then you release, a quarter turn on a valve, and then the system just charges.
I have all that stuff, Mike. I have a vacuum pump. I have a manifold set. I mean, I've done automotive refrigeration work before, but I don't want to mess this up because the stuff is expensive, right?
What do you think you would mess up if you did it? I guess that's what it comes down to.
I think the expression is you don't know what you don't know. The charge has to be correct. You can figure that out. Like there is an allowable amount of line set with the pre-charged, system. I don't know. You have to have the right CFM so the coil doesn't freeze over. I don't know.
For the way that I watch a lot of installers put this equipment in, there seems to be a lot of margin for, I won't say error, but if your CFM isn't quite enough, I don't think you're going to end up with the freezing, indoor unit.
I think you should come over and we should do this.
Okay.
Hey, maybe you guys want to write about it. I don't know.
Boy, as always, we heard from our fantastic listeners. Austin from Columbus writes in, Austin here again. I keep meaning to write in to say you should specify where to find the after show. I am a subscriber, but I listen through the Apple Podcast app. So when you started talking about the after show, I kept thinking, they keep mentioning this after show, but where the heck is it? I finally decided to wander over to the podcast page and dug around a little bit until I found it. Let's tighten it up. I love it, by the way. Cheers, Austin. Thanks, Austin. Andrew, is it hard to find the after show? It is, Mike.
It is.
Okay.
Yeah, it is hard to find the after show. We should we should set up a redirect for folks with a URL where they can go see it. So that will be coming soon.
Okay.
Will it,
You know,
will it be
folks,
available? Would that be available for those of us who are all access members who like to download the RSS feed for the regular podcast and Pro Talk?
That is still in the works. But you know, it's fall. We've been doing the after show all summer. It's time to make it official. So we'll figure
I think
that
it's
out.
official because it's here.
Yeah.
Well, Austin, thanks for the kind words, and we'll try and tighten it up. This comes from Connor. Hi, Patrick and others. I'm a GC in Eastern Oregon, primarily working on remodels and renovations. I recently put in an order for 7 vinyl single-hung windows. The lead time was only 4 to 5 weeks. Other items such as doors have had similarly short lead times. The supply chain gears seem to be moving quickly here in the high desert. Keep on air sealing. Best, Connor. Well, that's good news, right? Have you been able to get stuff, Mike?
I had a similar experience to Connor. I placed a special order for a custom door or semi-custom door with side lights. And initially, the supplier said it would be 6 to 10 weeks out, which actually worked with my schedule. And then he called me up a day or two later and says, it'll be here in 10 days to 2 weeks. And I'm like,
That never happens, yeah.
and I've heard the same thing from my brother yesterday. He said that he had put in an order for some windows and they're going to be coming in much earlier. And now I wonder if there's a problem where contractors have gotten to used to these extended timelines and based all of their work. And now all of the lumber yards or suppliers are going to have to manage storing this material
dozens
for a
of
while
windows, right?
if things come in early.
I can tell you, having been in the lumber business, that's a hassle, right? And like when that stuff gets damaged, everybody is sad. Oh my goodness! So I always say we have the best listeners, and Bryan's email describing grout is a good indicator. So bear with me, folks. It's a long one, but I think it's worth hearing. So you guys ready?
Yep.
Here we go. Dear Patrick, Bryan, and Ian, I'm writing in regards to your discussion in podcast 485 where you were discussing epoxy mortars and grouts. Ian asked for some feedback on differences and why some why some seem to like one over the other. Just a little background on me to preface my opinions on this subject. I was hired by a neighbor in 1999 at 18 to be a helper doing mostly tile and hardwood floors. I learned quickly and was running a crew a few months later. This wasn't my first construction job. I was hired at 14 to be a helper installing cedar fences, which meant I pretty much dug post holes all summer. Then I worked a couple summers doing HVAC control wiring for Train, sort of under the radar since I was only 15 and 16 years old. And then there was a summer of doing landscape work. How do you get to be a control wiring expert at 15? That's crazy. Anyway, I fell in love with tile and hardwood flooring and ended up leaving my pre-med studies and enrolled in a building construction management degree before finishing school. I started my own business doing tile and hardwood. Things got rough through the recession in 08-09, and I eventually took a job for a company as a drafter/project manager designing automated material handling systems, which I am still at. I enjoy my job, but tile and hardwood and home construction still holds a special place in my heart. I wouldn't be surprised if I ended up building custom houses someday. Anyway, back on topic, epoxy mortars are not very common now, mostly because modified thin sets have gotten so good. There are a few special cases where epoxies are needed, but I have never encountered that in the residential market. Usually it is a special case in commercial construction where some sort of chemical resistance is needed. There are modern modified thin sets that will successfully stick to pretty much anything you would want to stick tile to, and they are less expensive and easier to use than epoxy mortar. Grout is a whole different animal, and all the options have valid use cases. Books could be written with all of the options that exist today. I'd group them into 3 categories: Portland-based, epoxy-based, and acrylic. Within Portland-based, there are a lot of really great options, and you do get what you pay for. The nicer, more expensive options are better and bridge the gaps in performance with the other grouts. They are also maybe the easiest to use. Like all Portland products, excessive water is what causes the most problems with this grout. Too much when mixing and too much when clearing during the install will cause problems or ruin it. Newer grouts are better at resisting staining and efflorescence, but should still be sealed. The biggest draw to epoxy-based grouts is the stain resistance. They're a bit harder to use and quite a bit more expensive than Portland-based. I've used them a lot and did charge more when doing epoxy. I've never seen an issue caused by excessive water during the cleaning process, but the cleaning process is more work. You also have a pot life that you're working with, and when working alone, it can be tough to mix it, spread it, clean it before it gets too hard. If it fires off before you get it properly clean, life is not fun. I always feel a lot of added stress when using epoxy. Epoxy doesn't need to be sealed. Acrylic grouts are newer to the scene and seem to be a mix between epoxy and Portland. They typically come pre-mixed in a bucket and are activated by air, so they stay wet in a closed bucket and start to dry once they spread. This grout needs to be worked in small areas at a time, 3 to 4 feet per application. You wash it and then move to the next area. They are sensitive to water until fully cured, which most ask for a week or more. Too much water during cleaning or after, and there can be a major issue. I find these pleasant to work with if you can follow directions. If you try to use it like Portland grout, it won't go well. These grouts also cost more than Portland grouts, but do offer better stain resistance and don't need to be sealed. In my own house, I have used all 3 types of grout and have no problems with any of them for any application. Some people think the epoxy and acrylic type grouts look a little plasticky. You can tell them apart when looking close, but I don't find that to be a big deal. Epoxy and acrylic can be a little harder to use on walls and ceilings because they tend to be a little more fluid and want to fall out of slump. More could be said, but hopefully that gives you a little think about. Unless there is a specific need I am looking for, I generally go to the higher performance Portland grouts first. I attached a picture of the shower I did in my house last year. We started building our home right about when the pandemic hit. Talk about a wild ride with cost increases and supply issues. I wish I could have encountered the podcast before we started. I have learned a ton about energy efficiency that I could have applied to the house before drywall went up. I think I found the podcast right about the time drywall was being installed. I love the podcast and still find residential construction to be my passion. Bryan. Well, Bryan, that reads through, I gotta say, right?
Hey, Andrew, you got to publish this as an article in the magazine.
I was just going to say, we could just publish this as is.
We used to do this department called What's the Difference? And like, this is it.
This is it.
Yeah.
This is fantastic.
I think Bryan covered all the bases there. Did you guys have any questions for Bryan if he's listening to this later on? His tile shower is beautiful, by the way. And if you have any reason to doubt Bryan's chops, look at this picture of his beautiful tile shower, and you will not be skeptical.
I'd love to hear, his recipe for success. I think the grout is part of it, but there's more that goes into the shower that he did than grout. And it looks beautiful. And I will be doing a shower at some point in this third bathroom I'm putting in my basement. So
I think Bryan's shower is notable in the fact that it's just really classy. Like, I don't think it's going to look dated, even 2-3 decades from now. It's just simple.
Yeah.
You want to describe it a little bit? Shower?
It's like kind of a waterfall where the shower valve is coming down from the shower head. A white tile in the field. What color would you describe that waterfall, Mike?
It looked like a striated tile, so it gave that. It was a nice accent wall,
Mm-hmm.
It just where all the controls are. It just, along with the whole bathroom, just complemented everything.
Classy. This comes from Doug. Hi guys, I enjoyed the 485 after show discussion on being an owner builder. In my one-time experience, a house is ready to move in if you have the CO and can live with the unfinished projects. We moved in a week after I got the CO. The only cabinets were bases needed for the sink and dishwasher. There was also a tall cabinet next to the stove for the wall oven. No drawers or shelves. I was required to have doors on the bathrooms, and since I wanted to build the doors myself, I bought the cheapest hollow core doors I could find. The next months were spent building cabinets and doors. As when to start building, it depends on your situation, but if possible, do it before you're too old. I was 61 when I started and often wished I were 50 again. We made the decision to start in the spring of 2010. The economy was still shaky, but we felt somebody needed to start spending again. The advantage this time gave me was that subcontractors were available within days, not weeks. I could call the local lumberyard in the morning and have 2x4s delivered that afternoon. Whenever you start, plan on it taking longer and costing more than you expected. I really like the after show conversations. Keep the discussion going, Doug. Plan on it taking longer and costing more is gospel for any construction project, I think, right?
About 30 years ago, Rick Arnold and I, as a means to, during the savings and loan crisis, to keep our crew working, we wanted to attract business. So we taught a class that we called How to Contract Your Own Home. And we probably had about maybe 40 or 50 people over the course of the year or two we taught it. It was a 10-week class, 5 hours, one night a week. So it was a pretty intensive thing. And a lot of people went on to successfully build their own homes. So one thing that I learned from them in watching the way people managed the whole construction or how much they took on themselves was that it's really an individual's personality that made the difference on whether they were successful or not. And the people who were easygoing and just kind of friendly and just got along with everybody, everything went smoothly. But the folks that were really nervous about everything, they were the folks that had a lot more challenge to do the whole project. And there were, of course, lots of funny stories that came out of those, watching those people build their houses.
Well, you can't leave us hanging. What's at least one of them?
One of them, corner lot. And this was a guy who was not one of our successful students. Corner lot. He had the excavation done with he hired a lot of the subs that we use. So he had the excavation done, put the foundation in, got it all set. And our crew was ready to frame it for him. And then his wife came to the job and said, "Oh no, that's the wrong street. We want it to face the other street." So he actually had to backhoe or crush in the foundation, dig a new hole, and set it facing the other street. So lesson number one, make sure that your partner is on board with all the decisions.
Wow, that is a good one. I can tell you that my experience doing my own stuff is that you, at a point, like, I just need to get to this one step, and then it's going to be smooth sailing. And then you get there, and it's like, I just need to get to this step, and then it's going to be smooth sailing, and it's never smooth sailing.
Never is.
And if you can go in understanding, there's going to be rough seas kind of the whole time. Like you said, like easygoing, you know, no problems insurmountable, and you just keep plugging along. At least that's what I keep telling myself.
I can tell you it's not very relaxing to be like, have winter approaching when you're building your house in Stowe, Vermont, and there's like still open holes in it. It's like that'll get on your case. Mike, you have a question for the podcast. Do you want to? I mean, I could read this. I'm not gonna. And you also sent a video to the podcast, so folks who are curious about seeing what you're up against can look at it and get a first-person account. But can you tell me what you're dealing with at your new place?
No, I didn't time this to. I sent this in as a genuine question. I didn't time it. You and I didn't conspire for me to be on today. So
no.
But I purchased a house in Tucson, Arizona, sort of as a second house to spend the winters in, and then go on visit periodically. And we are so northern U.S., even Canada based in our knowledge about buildings. And when you get down south, whether it's the southeast, the southwest, or far west, they build in many different ways. And we don't discuss that a lot in fine home building. And so I don't understand how the buildings work out there in a desert climate. And so it's basically a flat roof, and there are 2x10 rafters, and it's got fiberglass insulation. It was built in 1979 or so. And when I opened up a little cavity to peek into the rafter bays to see how they were insulated, it's got almost full depth insulation, but there's a little bit of a gap between the underside of the sheathing and the top of the insulation. Now, one thing we always talk about in northern climates with wind wash through fibrous insulation, you don't want to have the ventilation air coming in through your attic intakes washing through or traveling through the insulation because it degrades the performance. So here's a case where I've got blocks between the rafters, open rafter bays at the soffits, what ordinarily would be the soffits, the rafter tails, and then there are holes cut with screens, common out west. And then, so there are screens over it, so the air's getting into the insulation, traveling through the insulation, maybe even through the underside of the roof sheathing. And then there are these odd looking, it's got parapet walls, and there's a coping that comes up the parapet wall so that there's a little void, I'm guessing, where they ran the roof sheathing up and maybe curved it up a little bit. It's only 1/2-inch plywood, so you can do that with 1/2-inch plywood on the axis. And then there are these little vents. There's like 3 or 4 of them on the high side parapet wall. So I'm guessing the air is supposed to know that it comes in at the bird blocks and goes out through the top. But my question is, because I'm thinking about air sealing, I can't air seal it from the inside. So I want to stop any air moving from inside to outside. Can I block off those, the bird blocks and the intake vents where the screens are and block off the exhaust without causing a moisture problem? And I just don't know enough about why that was put in, if there's a benefit to putting in this ventilation, and if I'm going to cause a problem if I block those off in a desert climate on a flat roof. You guys have any experience
I know a guy
with this?
who I would ask this question, but it's you. So,
So, Mike, I thought the discussion around how you're heating or mostly cooling this house too is maybe a little warranted about, when we're talking about sealing up some drying potential.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're going to have no problem sealing those up, Mike, and I think you get why, right? Because it's not working anyway, right? It's not gonna convect. There's not enough roof pitch. We've learned with research that you need at least a 412 pitch to get any meaningful convection as for ventilation. The thing that I thought about when I saw this assembly was like, there better be a darn good air barrier underneath because you're going to have condensation on the underside of the roof sheathing is my guess, because the light colored roof at nighttime is going to get very cold. A phenomenon called night sky radiation. So if you have, humid air getting up in that assembly, it's going to condense on the sheathing at night because it's going to be cold.
But I'm even wondering where the moisture is coming from, because the indoor, I've monitored the indoor humidity, and in wintertime, it's about 12%. So
I'm gonna read you something that Martin wrote years ago. This is my familiarity with this. I wrote, in Arizona, white roofing causes wet insulation for the June 2000 issue of Energy Design Update. My article quoted building scientist William Rose. He says, in December, January, and February, the fiberglass was wringing wet, said Rose. The OSB was 5 to 7 degrees colder than the outdoor air, colder than the indoors or the outdoors. In this climate, radiant effects become really important. There is nothing standing in the way of the roof radiating out to space. You have a whole lot of heat loss from the roof surface day and night. With this white roofing, 80% of the heat that hits this roof is reflected. The sun can't keep up with the heat losses to the sky. What you've created is a sky-powered cooling coil, and the fiberglass insulation is like a dirty condensate pan. The roof sheathing gets so cold, it's sucking wetness out of dry air.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
That is fantastic.
Yeah.
Wow, that's great.
That's actually telling. See, now I did learn something. And so even though it's a really dry climate, there's still some moisture. And because that surface is getting that cold at night, maybe those vents are doing something. Well, think about it from now. You're thinking ventilation, air, and in the flowing. Now, what about ventilation air that isn't really flowing in the natural state that you think of the stack effect, but it's enough? Think of it maybe more so as
It's moving more to less.
moisture diffusion port as opposed to a ventilation space, so that moisture that is up there may be able to diffuse to either the intake or the exhaust, because effectively they're at the levels playing field.
Well, hopefully someone who knows more about this than us will actually have an answer for you. based
And
on our
that's what I was
conversation.
hoping.
Yeah.
We're going to crowdsource an answer, some other comments, hopefully.
Yeah, it's a
I
great
need your help.
question. And as you point out, we do a poor job of covering this part of the country in fine home building content. So maybe this is a launching off point.
You mentioned are you taking the evaporative cooling system out?
Yeah, so I also sort of as a sidebar threw in, because I was up on the roof with the video, and if you get a chance, do watch the video, because it's kind of, for those of us who used to slope roofs and all of our equipment on the ground out west, frequently it's like a commercial building throughout the country where you put the HVAC equipment right up on the roof. And so this has out west, evaporative cooling was the first type of cooling that was installed in homes, and now that's being phased out. So on this home, because of the age, it has both an evaporative cooler, and a swamp cooler in colloquial terms, and then it has a regular conventional refrigerant-based system. And those two are playing together with a Y in the ductwork, and all the ductwork, at least the return ductwork, is up on the roof, all exposed to the elements. So it's just a different sort of situation. So yeah, I'm going to take the swamp cooler off because it was decommissioned at some point long before I purchased the house. And because of the Y, where both of the supplies from the evaporative cooler and from the refrigerant-based system, heat pump, both go into this Y to go into the supply ductwork, which is below the ceiling level inside. They've used just a really crude baffle system. It's just like a louvered baffle system where one side is pressurized and it closes the baffles, but of course it's like a jalousie window. It's just a bunch of joints which can leak and actually blow conditioned air back through the other system. In this case, it would be the evaporative cooler. So I'm going to rejigger the ductwork to have just an elbow and go down.
Anyone who's been on the Las Vegas monorail will have seen arrangements like this on every commercial building in Las Vegas, and it's mind-boggling to see like ductwork out in 110-degree heat, right?
But I was thinking about the evaporative cooler and like how it works is like it introduces moisture into the air, and so it's going down this route of like you're sealing up potentially, but if the humidity in your house is 12%, it probably doesn't matter all that much.
Yeah, and that's the whole point, is when you draw the air over the evaporative cooling mat that the water dribbles down, there's just a natural cooling effect as that moisture is drying. You're just utilizing
the heat of
that phase
vaporization.
change.
It's absorbing energy, turning it into a gas, right?
But it's a big waste of water in some regards too, in a desert climate.
Yeah.
What do you think about the architecture and the home building out there generally? It must be a little confusing.
For me, it is. Yeah,
Yeah.
It is. Yeah, and I'm hoping to learn more and hanging out there, and I want to meet some builders. So hey, anybody who's in the Tucson area, get in touch, and I'd love to go hang out with you if you're a listener, and as well learn from you. Hopefully, if you've been there in the area for a while and understand the architecture.
Did you hire a home inspector when you bought your house there?
Initially, I did, but then timing didn't work out. So I've been meaning to, and I will when I have time when I'm there this winter. There's a gentleman I met just by randomly contacting a home inspector who happened to live nearby, about 2 miles away, and he's originally from Boston. And he moved to the Southwest 20 years ago. So I'm planning to give him a call and just hire him as hey, I just want to hire you for a couple hours just to pick your brain kind of thing.
He's going to want to build you a colonial.
Well, I interviewed him, so he really in just talking with him, I could tell he was a contractor in New England, and he moved out there and he became a home inspector, and he understands the construction vernacular out there, and he also understands the construction of different periods because home inspectors see everything. They see new homes, they see old homes, and they get to understand a region that they work in.
Well, I can't wait to see how this unfolds. It's a great thing. And folks, I hope you will go to the podcast page and check out Mike's videos. And if you can help, please do. This comes from Will in South Carolina. First, let me say I love the podcast. After months of listening to you all mention zip tape in almost every episode, I seem to have this subconscious desire to replace my stock of duct tape for zip tape. Just kidding. Sort of. The real question is how many times can you reasonably re-shingle over OSB sheathing with asphalt shingles? I live in South Carolina, if that matters, and my home was built in 2001. It's a custom, single-story traditional with relatively high pitch. Again, if it matters. It originally had 3-tab architectural shingles and was re-roofed in 2020 with Owens Corning architecturals. As my luck would have it, this past May, a monster hailstorm blew through and basically my whole neighborhood was re-roofed. My roof has significant signs of damage that I saw with my drone, and my roofer confirmed by climbing up onto it. There are no leaks, but the lifespan has definitely taken a hit, and it will likely need to be re-roofed in the very near future. Given the number of penetrations required by the first and second roof, is there a rule of thumb on how many times a roof can be re-shingled over OSB? I know this is an exaggeration, but the amount of debris in my attic from the last re-roofing felt like I had lost 2 to 3 sheets in fragments. At some point, it seems like there wouldn't be enough purchase. On behalf of my wife and friends, they thank you for adding both purchase and zip tape to my vocabulary. Thanks in advance, Will. Will, that's a fantastic question, right, Mike?
Well, it's a good question, and I like that he threw in purchase because it's a term that we use at the magazine for a certain reason. It's not in the way most people think of it is in purchasing a product. It's in having a mechanical hold on something, and I think it might be worthy of a blog post I might have to write just to kind of clue people in that we can refer to. Yeah, what is purchase? But yeah, I like this question because think about all the modern building materials that have come on the market in the last 30 years, and we don't know how they're going to perform 50 years, 100 years, 150 or 200 years. We can look back at old homes and we know how everything worked or didn't work from those generations before. So we're getting the advantage of what our foreparents built. But we will not be here 100 years from now, probably, to be able to assess how OSB and other materials perform and what happens when you put on 3 or 4 roofs. So I did some calculations. OSB has only been widely available for about 35 years. So if you figure it got its initial roof, and most of the roofs that were installed in the last 30 years or so are in that 30 to 40 year range, even though some people might extend the 25-year listed warranty. So they're only getting their first re-roof right around now. So we're not going to know for a while. And it could be, you figure if you take 30 to 35 years, then we could be up to, at that pace, 100 years to get a third re-roof. So it takes a while. So I did a calculation on the size of an 11 gauge roofing nail and how much area that would poke through a hole, and then added it all up. Your average 4x8 sheet of sheathing gets punched by 80 nails with a metric shingle, 4 nails per shingle plus a few extras here and there. So you get 80 nails going in. If you figure over the course of 100 years, you do 3 re-roofs, so you got 240 holes. Now, the diameter area of an 11 gauge nail is 0.12 inches. And when you do the math quickly, you come up with an area. So over 100 years, all those holes will add up to a square area of 2 3/4 square inches, which isn't very much. So if you round that up to 3 inches, you can kind of figure each re-roof, you're causing about a 1 inch by 1 inch square of penetration. So I don't think it matters, is what it amounts to. It's like a hammer claw getting punched in one hole.
Or a
in
plumbing
a
vent,
roof sheet.
right?
Yeah, or a small plumbing vent, very small plumbing vent. So I wouldn't worry about it.
I don't know. So I'm going to play devil's advocate here. So it doesn't work that way. It takes a big chip off the back side. So I think you're, in effect, not making a big hole. You're making the panel thinner. What do you think about that?
Well, I did a little more research on what the manufacturer's minimum thicknesses are and the Asphalt Roofing Manufacturers Association. So it's 3/8 of an inch plywood is what everything's based on, a 3/8 inch wood structural panel. So that'd be a 3/8 inch OSB. OSB runs 7/16 as a minimum, but a lot of people put on 5/8, which is, I think, a very good practice, 5/8 roof sheathing. So if we're working from either, well, say the worst case, 7/16. So yeah, you can lose a 1/16 of an inch off of all the flakes that fell off the bottom of the sheathing from nailing all those nails in, and still not have potentially, you're still within tolerance. Of course, when you look at the code, the roofers are supposed to evaluate the roof sheathing when they're re-roofing. So hopefully you hire a good roofer and that they're walking around on the roof looking for and looking in the space if they can get into an attic and see if there are any damaged spots and then replacing that sheathing. At some point, undoubtedly, whether it's 50 years, 100 years, or 200 years from now, roof sheathing would need to be replaced. Something to keep in mind.
And I think in most cases, it doesn't need to be replaced. It needs a new layer on top, right? You wouldn't need to take off the existing sheathing, right?
True. It could do that. You could just put another layer on, which is what we do in the case of a lot of plank sheathing, because that doesn't qualify as a nailing base depending on the situation of the shingle you're using. So we'll put down a layer of sheathing, structural panels, so that we can put on a new roof.
What a great question. We have like the smartest people listen to this show.
Yeah, I agree.
This comes from Alex, and I think you all will find Alex's experience to be familiar. Alex lives in Silver Spring, Maryland. Hello, FHB podcast gang. I'd appreciate the host's perspective on a possible project of mine. I purchased my home in October of 2018. It's a small 750 square foot 1920s bungalow with a 650 square foot walkout basement. It has 3 bedrooms and 2 baths. We purchased it with the intention of doing an addition, but because of local ordinances, we would have to bring the entire house up to code, and doing so would cost as much or more than rebuilding the house. We talked to an architect that had stock plans, and he gave the architectural drawings to a builder who he worked with locally. The builder thought he could build the 2,100 square foot house for around $350 to $400K. Based on those numbers, we worked with the architect to make some minor changes, removing the soaking tub in the master bedroom and relocating the range out of the island, paid for engineering and design of the basement, and did a survey. $25,000 later, with the plans in hand, we went back to the builder, who started a quote. When he passed $850,000, he let us know that the build was going to end up in the $900K range. At that point, we put the project on hold. The architect came back to us with another builder recommendation. We talked to him, and he thought he could build the home for $650K with an additional $50,000 for utility connections amortized over 30 years. We eliminated the patio and deck, substituted the wood-burning fireplace for a gas direct vent, moved the air barrier from the roof to the second floor ceiling, spray foam on the top side of the drywall ceiling, followed by fluffy stuff. No finished basement, no basement bath, plywood and wire lath versus block masonry for stone veneers. We plan on using the front closet as a utility chase, eliminating the attic, the HVAC light fixtures for the basement, and no build-ins around the fireplace. Finishes were architectural asphalt shingles, hardy siding, zip panel sheathing, hardwood floors, paint grade, doors, and trim. The second builder's bid was $650,000 for the house, $50,000 for the utilities, and a $120,000 builder's fee. It was the builder fee that caught us by surprise. I'm not sure what else to eliminate from the build that could reduce the overall cost. The second builder thought that zip sheathing was actually cheaper than OSB. Can the great minds of the FHB podcast come up with some reasonable cost-cutting measures? Both of these builders build custom multi-million-dollar homes with the architect. Should I look for another builder? I'm not trying to hire the cheapest person in town, but the max we can afford to spend on this build is $650,000. Are we delusional to think that a 2,100 square foot home could be built for that price? For the money spent, we could purchase a much larger home with a bigger yard. We're emotionally invested in the location. We like our neighbors, attached to the location, and my wife doesn't want to leave the neighborhood. I also built a 2-car garage in the backyard with my 70-year-old father. It was $50,000, fully finished with a heat pump. It's really a wood shop. In the meantime, we continue to save and keep our eye out for a new to us home, but people around us tend to own their homes for 20 plus years. My neighbor's house has actually been owned by the same family since it was originally built 100 years ago. Love the podcast. Keep up the great work, Alex. Oh my gosh. So how are we going to save Alex hundreds of thousands of dollars on his build?
The number that jumped out to me was that $120,000 builder's fee, and then seeing that he built his 2-car garage, and then I went and looked at his 2-car garage on his Instagram. You know, is self-building or self-contracting an option in Silver Springs, Maryland?
Go ahead, Mike. I don't know what to say, honestly.
Yeah. Well, I have a lot of thoughts on this, but I don't want to, we don't want to take an hour here on it, although we could. When you look at just the numbers granted, what you mentioned, Andrew, about that builder's fee added on top of the cost of construction, it kind of gets like, well, how's that contract structured? But going back to that initial numbers that the architect offered through the builder that just gave a ballpark, that works out to be between $100 and $166 a square foot. That's impossible. Impossible.
Yeah.
Did you guys? I suppose you looked at the plans that that Alex sent. That's a very handsome house. It's a house that you could build in 100 years. People will be thinking it was a classic house built maybe 50 years ago from here. Back in the 20s or 30s. It's a very nice house. A lot of exterior detailing, and even though he mentions only fiber cement siding, which is, economical, but the amount of detail that's there, I can only extrapolate to what the interior details are. He mentioned paint grade doors. Well, they're 4-panel horizontal doors. I know what those cost. Those are going to cost you maybe $250 to $350 each, even though they're paint grade. There's a lot of stuff that's in there that is actually reasonable for the prices that you're getting. $900,000, when you do the math at a 2,100 square foot house, comes up to be, I think, $450 or $460 per square foot. That's well within the range of the numbers I'm hearing from custom home builders, so it's not extravagant. It might be price shocking for people, but it's actually in line.
We have to talk about where this is too. Silver Spring, Maryland is a Washington, D.C. suburb. It's an affluent community, and stuff is expensive, right?
Yep. So the way to control costs, and it's what I used to tell clients when they have their wish list, and then I say what the reality is you build a rectangular box and with a 6-pitch roof without any overhangs. It's just super stripped down, simple, plain old track home. I won't say
and it's
ugly,
still going to cost $500,000, right?
Exactly. But that's the way you control costs. And then you start out with wall-to-wall carpeting and sheet vinyl. And then when you can afford it, you put in the hardwood. I mean, there's ways to do it, but a lot of people don't want to make the compromises that it takes to do it. Or you compromise.
No one's going to want an ugly house in this, desirable neighborhood, right? That's not how that works.
It's true. Yeah.
It's a hard thing, Alex. I think maybe you're going to have to find another neighborhood you love as much, is my easy answer from here in Connecticut. But it's, if you're going to think you're going to build a new house on this lot for less than $300 a square foot, I don't think you're going to do it.
And an interesting thing is when you're at that 2,100 square foot level, you could bump that up to 3,000, and on a per square foot basis, the price comes down, but the overall number, say it's 900, you're only talking 930. So you can actually bring the price per square foot down. when you try to pack in several bathrooms, kitchen, all those high cost things into a small footprint, the price per square foot is higher, relatively speaking.
How do you guys feel about, so thinking about the remodel costing just as much as a new build? Seeing these new build numbers, do you think he should look at a remodel again?
Yeah, even though he would have to upgrade to current code, if you did a gut rehab and added that extra square footage with the addition, it may be more cost effective.
I'm going to, toss something out from my own experience. Living in a small house is not bad. Maybe you can decide that you love your little house, and I would tell you that efficient use of interior space makes a small house feel and work a lot bigger. Build-ins to hold your stuff, spaces that do more than one thing. All these techniques can make it possible for, a family to live in a 750 square foot house. I mean, it wasn't that uncommon that long ago.
And there is such a deep well of information, both in the old design columns as well as in the old houses issues that had profiled small homes, as well as the reprint books that Taunton's has done, to give you those sort of ideas you're talking about, Patrick, on how to economize on space and utilize it to the best level.
And put that wood shop to use out back.
To build some stuff, I'm guessing.
Building built-ins is fun, and it's even more fun in an old home where nothing is like close to square. So,
and boy, bang for your DIY buck. It is hard to beat casework and cabinet work, right, Mike? It is a great way to save money and enjoy yourself. If clearly he likes woodworking, do some woodworking, right?
My only other idea was tear the house down and just build like 3 more garages.
Or a barn dominium.
I don't know how much the neighbors would like.
Jeff, what are your thoughts on this?
I mean, without knowing about his family and, the idea of keeping the small house is an open question, really. But yeah, it's mind-boggling how expensive stuff is. I mean, because I think about how much I paid for my house. Granted, that was almost 20 years ago, but it's like, that's a lot of money.
Yeah. I can tell you the way folks build, houses in the $500, $600, $700, $1,000 range in, my part of Connecticut is to build, as Mike describes, a giant box with a truss roof. Oftentimes, the second floor overhangs the first floor to get more square footage for the reasons Mike pointed out. It doesn't add much more to the cost. It is an energy penalty with those goofy Garrison colonial details, but they're all boxy. They all have vinyl siding. It is pretty simple construction. Speaking of the cost of things, woo! So something caught my eye in the New York Times just yesterday, 2 days ago. It says, a study by House Method, a website that provides guides and information to homeowners, examined the value of bathroom remodels to help answer the question. To put it simply, for a gut bathroom renovation, the answer is usually yes. The answer that they're answering is, does it make sense to remodel your bathroom? Will you get the money back when you sell your house? The 2022 report says the average full bathroom remodel costs $26,574, for which homeowners can expect a return on investment upon resale of roughly 60%, about $15,944. In all 50 states, an average bathroom makeover increased a home's resale value by more than enough to pay for the renovation. That doesn't make sense, right? It doesn't make any sense. How do they get this stuff so wrong? The interesting part here was what a new bathroom costs in the various states of the union. And so Maine, interestingly, had the highest return of investment of 89%, and their average bathroom remodel cost $25,517. What do you think, Mike? Does that sound like in the ballpark for you? You're like, no, I could do it for $5.
Does it mean Maine has the worst bathrooms?
No, oh, you. Well,
And they need a lot of upgrading.
it means California has the most expensive bathrooms, which I'm sure is a shock to everybody. At nearly $35,000, and they got 74% back at sale. And Kansas had the lowest cost at $23,913, and you would get 43% back at resale in Kansas.
I scrutinized I went 3 layers deep in that this publication's, not the New York Times now, but on this House Method group to try to figure out what their metrics were for determining all of these values and the cost and then the value. Remodeling Magazine for many, many years did their annual cost value, and they would come up with a specific set of, this is what the bathroom will include. And it would list out, this type of tile, this type of countertop, vanity. So they already had their control cost basis. And then they would shop it around to builders, and then they would also query real estate agents to see how much the value was. I couldn't find any of the methodology in that what the research. So we don't even know.
So you couldn't find the methodology, the cost versus value report from Remodeling Magazine, or this other
from this other group.
Okay.
Remodeling did a good job at giving us how they did it all. Sal did a good job when he was running it, and so on. But here, there was nothing I could find. So I don't know how they did their survey, if it was just randomly calling homeowners and ask them, or what. So you don't,
as they say,
garbage in,
garbage out when it's
yeah.
So we have a feature story we're working on coming up. Kind of thinking of whose house, who sent us the shower.
Bryan?
You mean our
it was
grout?
Bryan. Yeah. Our grout guy was Bryan.
Mm-hmm.
So thinking of the shower and how good that bathroom looked, it felt like semi-timeless, and thinking of, there are like industry reports that a bathroom gets remodeled on average, every 5 to 7 years. And it's like the most remodeled room in the house, and that can also feel wasteful, but it's like mostly remodeled to update aesthetics. But thinking about like what materials can go in a bathroom that will like stand the test of time from both an aesthetic standpoint, but also like a durability standpoint. It led me down this path, when they mentioned in this article, if you spend $2,000 to lay down new tile, your return may only be hundreds of dollars. And it's like, where do you spend that big chunk of money in a bathroom thinking, it might be remodeled again, but I won't have to touch the floor, or how do you how do you like plan for a remodel when you're remodeling like the next remodel,
It's almost like the nesting of remodeling. It's like you want to plan for what you eventually want to get to, or future-proof any future remodels by what you do in the current phase of that remodel.
When they remodeled the bathroom in my house, before we bought it, there's like not in my mind, I was like, well, we know stuff is probably going to go wrong, and you're going to need access to repair things, but like there's not an access panel anywhere. So in my mind, I'm thinking, if I remodel a bathroom, putting in like a good looking access panel and not just like cutting open a sheet of drywall would give me peace of mind, and like planning in some maintenance versus like just assuming everything will be fine forever.
So you're planning an article that would cover this sort of topic?
Yeah, thinking about choosing materials and design, aesthetics for long-lived bathrooms.
So I think that would be a good article for the New York Times to pick up and reprint, because it'd be a lot more valuable to homeowners than what they picked up here.
Just spend your money and you'll get it back. Yeah.
I think, like return on investment for remodeling projects is the dumbest reason to do that. Honestly, I think you want to improve the quality of your life and fix stuff that's not working. It's like, if you think you're going to make money remodeling your house when you sell it, I think that's a fool's errand, really. Oh, I'm sorry. I had to get that off my chest.
But speaking of money and selling houses, in our after show, we're going to talk to Mike Guertin here about his experience investing in real estate, remodeling houses, and he's promised to be, very open and honest and frank about the realities of it, especially he's been doing this for decades, and I think it'll be fun to hear from him in our after show about all of it.
Additionally, it's within the skill set of the folks who listen to this show. I'm sure that folks who are either investing in real estate as a means of retirement or additional income, or they're considering it. So I think it is a perfect fit. But that's all the time we have for the regular podcast. Thanks to Mike, Andrew, and Jeff for joining me, and thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send us your comments, questions, and suggestions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. And please like, comment, or review us however you're listening. It helps other folks find our podcast. Stay safe, everybody. Keep craft alive. Keep air sealing.